Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. You guys sent in a ton of articles and research on digital privacy.
Yeah,
And, well, it's a pretty hot topic right now. It feels like every day there's a new headline about data breaches or facial recognition or online tracking in general.
it really does feel like you can't escape it.
Right. So we're going to dive deep today. Untangle some of the complexities of digital privacy, explore the ethical dilemmas it raises,
Mhm.
and hopefully arm you with the knowledge to kind of navigate this digital landscape a little bit better.
I think that's important because honestly, even defining digital privacy is tricky these days. The
Yeah.
landscape is constantly changing.
Yeah, I bet. So where do we even begin? How do we define digital privacy in today's world?
It boils down to control over your personal information online.
Yeah.
Everything you do online contributes to a huge amount of data about you.
Like a digital fingerprint.
Exactly. Every click, every purchase, every post you make, all
Exactly.
adds up. And this data can be collected and used in ways you might not even realize.
And that's where things get a little creepy, right?
Well, one of the sources you sent actually mentioned Article 12 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights,
Okay.
which addresses the right to privacy.
Mm.
But as we rely more and more on digital services, that right is being challenged in ways we never could have imagined.
Yeah, it's kind of scary when you think about it. It's pretty heavy stuff.
It is.
So, when I think about threats to digital privacy, my mind immediately goes to government surveillance.
Of course.
And you sent over some really interesting articles about how facial recognition technology is being used in China.
Oh, yeah. China's a prime example. They're using facial recognition for mass surveillance, tracking citizens' movements, and even suppressing dissent.
It's like something out of a dystopian novel.
It really is.
Hmm.
And it raises a huge question. Where's the line between security and freedom?
Right, because I'm sure they'd argue it helps keep people safe.
Exactly.
Right.
That's the core of the debate.
Hmm.
One of the articles also highlighted the U.S. National Security Agency's PRISM program,
Oh, yeah, I've heard that.
which collects massive amounts of data in the name of national security.
So it's not just China, it's happening here too.
It's happening globally. And it makes you wonder, how much of our digital lives are truly private?
It's a valid question. And while governments are part of the problem, we can't forget about corporations.
Oh, absolutely. They
I-
play a massive role in this, too.
You're talking about companies like Google and Facebook, right? Their whole business model is based on our data.
Exactly. They collect tons of information about our online behavior and use it to target us with ads.
And we just kind of go along with it?
Well, some experts call it illusory consent because the way those terms of service are written, they make it really hard to understand what we're actually agreeing to.
So it's not really consent if we don't
Yeah.
fully understand what's
Well,
happening.
precisely. We click agree without really knowing the implications.
It's funny because I actually had this happen to me once. I was downloading some random app and just blindly accepted the terms and conditions.
We've all been there.
And then later I found out they had access to my entire contact list. It was creepy.
It is a bit unsettling. It gets even worse when you consider data breaches. The Equifax hack in 2017 is a perfect example.
Yeah, that was a big one.
Over 147 million people had their personal information compromised. Social security numbers, birth dates, addresses, even credit card details.
Wow. So what are the long-term consequences of something like that?
It can be devastating.
Yeah.
It puts people at risk of identity theft, financial fraud, all sorts of problems.
That's scary. So we're stuck in this weird place. We need these digital services to function in the modern world.
We do.
But using them means giving up a ton of personal information. What are we supposed to do?
It's a tough question.
Mm.
It really raises fundamental questions about autonomy in a digital age.
Mm.
How much control do we actually have when these services are so essential for work, education, social connection?
Yeah, it feels like we have to choose between participating in society and safeguarding our privacy.
It's a real tension. And it highlights the need for more awareness, better regulations, and a whole new approach to data privacy in this crazy interconnected world we live in.
Okay, so we've talked about government surveillance and corporations. What else threatens our digital privacy?
Well, there's another piece of the puzzle that we can't ignore.
Okay, what's that?
Algorithms.
Ugh, yeah, algorithms. This is where things get really complicated.
It's where technology and ethics collide.
Yeah. And it honestly kind of freaks me out.
Algorithmic profiling uses data to predict future behavior. It's used for everything from credit scores to personalized ads. But it can also perpetuate existing biases.
So you're talking about things like predictive policing.
Exactly.
Hmm.
There's a lot of concern about how these algorithms can actually reinforce discriminatory practices.
But how does that even work?
Well, imagine an algorithm is trained on data that shows a higher arrest rate in certain neighborhoods.
Okay.
Based on that data, it might predict that people from those neighborhoods are more likely to commit crimes in the future, even if that's not true.
So it's basically biased from the start and uses that bias to justify more discrimination.
That's a good way to put it. It's just one example of how technology can be used in harmful ways. It's a slippery slope, and we need to be careful.
It's all starting to feel pretty overwhelming, like we're surrounded by threats to our digital privacy. Is there any hope for us?
There is, but it's going to require collective action, thoughtful regulation, and a fundamental shift in how we think about technology.
Okay, I'm ready to talk solutions, but first, I think we need a quick break to process all of this. We'll be back in just a few minutes with part 2 of our deep dive into digital privacy. All right, we're back and ready to talk solutions. So in part 1, we talked about all the ways our digital privacy is under threat, which is honestly a little bit scary, but I'm hoping we can explore some ways to actually protect ourselves online.
Absolutely. There are things you can do to take back some control.
Okay, good. So let's talk about some of those tools and strategies. We touched on encryption and anonymity networks earlier. Can you unpack those a little bit more?
Sure. So encryption is basically scrambling your data. So only someone with the right key can access it, like putting a lock on your digital information.
Okay, so it's like sending a secret message in code that only the intended recipient can read.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, a lot of online services like email providers and messaging apps already offer end-to-end encryption by default.
Oh, really? I didn't realize that.
Yeah. So that means only you and the person you're talking to can read those messages. Not even the company running the service can access them.
That's good to know. But we also talked about some controversy around encryption, right?
Right. Some law enforcement agencies have argued that strong encryption makes it harder for them to investigate crimes.
I can see their point.
And they've called for backdoors to be built into encryption systems, which would let them access data with a warrant.
But wouldn't that create vulnerabilities that hackers could exploit?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the big concern from privacy advocates. They say any backdoor weakens security for everyone. It's a tough debate with no easy answers.
It always seems to come back to that balance between security and privacy.
It's a constant tension for sure.
Okay, so what about anonymity networks? How do those work?
Anonymity networks like Tor are designed to make your online activity really hard to track.
Oh, okay.
They route your internet traffic through a bunch of different servers all over the world.
Oh, wow.
So it's almost impossible to trace your digital footprints.
So it's like my signal is bouncing all over the globe, making it really hard to figure out where I am or what I'm doing.
Exactly. Which can be really important for people like journalists, activists, or anyone who needs to protect their identity online.
I bet. But didn't you also say that anonymity networks can be used for illegal activities?
Unfortunately, yeah. While Tor can be used for good, it can also be exploited by criminals.
Yeah.
Which is why there's so much debate about whether these networks should be regulated or even banned.
There's that balancing act again, trying to protect privacy without enabling illegal activity.
It's a challenge, but an important one.
Okay, so we've got encryption anonymity networks. What about things we can do on a more individual level to protect our privacy, like on our own devices?
Well, being mindful of what you share online is a big one. Think before you post. And double-check your privacy settings on social media and other apps.
That's good advice. But honestly, it feels like everything we do is tracked these days. Is there any way to minimize that feeling of constantly being watched?
There are a few things you can try.
Yeah.
You can use privacy-focused browsers like Brave or Firefox. They block trackers and cookies by default.
Okay, I've heard of those.
And you could also consider using a VPN.
A VPN. I've always been a little confused about those. How do they actually work?
A VPN encrypts your internet traffic and routes it through a server in a different location. So it's like creating a secure tunnel for your data, making it harder for websites to track you.
So it's like masking my location and making it harder to figure out who I am. A digital disguise.
You got it. It's especially useful when you're using public Wi-Fi networks.
That makes sense. Are they difficult to set up?
Not at all. Most VPN providers have easy-to-use apps.
So we've got encryption anonymity networks, being mindful about what we share, using privacy-focused browsers and VPNs. That's starting to feel like a pretty good toolkit.
It is. But remember, you don't have to use everything. It's about finding what works best for you and your level of concern about privacy.
Right. It's all about being informed and making choices that align with our values. Okay, so now I think we need to talk about the elephant in the room. AI. It's everywhere these days, and it's clearly having a huge impact on digital privacy.
It's a double-edged sword when it comes to privacy. AI presents both opportunities and challenges.
Can you explain that a bit more? How can AI be both good and bad for privacy?
Well, on the one hand, AI can actually be used to enhance privacy. For example, some AI-powered privacy tools can help you manage your online identity, control your data sharing, and even detect data breaches.
So AI can almost be like our privacy bodyguard.
In a way, yes. But we can't ignore the other side of the coin. AI can also be used to erode privacy. Like we discussed earlier, it's being used for hyper-targeted surveillance and predictive policing. AI algorithms can analyze huge amounts of data to identify patterns and make predictions.
Which can be used to track our movements, predict our behavior, even manipulate our choices.
It's definitely a valid concern.
So how do we regulate something as complex and rapidly changing as AI? It seems impossible.
It's a huge challenge,
Mhm.
but a crucial one. We need to start thinking about ethical guidelines and regulations that prioritize privacy and human rights.
Okay, so what are some key things to consider when it comes to regulating AI and digital privacy?
Transparency is huge.
Hmm.
You need to understand how these algorithms work, what data they're trained on, how they're making decisions. That's the only way to make sure they're fair, accountable, and unbiased.
So no more black boxes. We need to be able to see what's going on inside these systems.
Exactly. And we need to make sure humans are still involved in making important decisions that affect people's lives. AI should augment human intelligence, not replace it.
That makes sense. It's about finding the right balance.
It is.
So we need to harness the power of AI while making sure it's used ethically and responsibly.
That's the goal. And that's where the idea of human-centered design comes in. These AI systems should be designed with human needs in mind from the very beginning.
So it's not just about what AI can do, but how it impacts people and society.
Exactly. It requires a collaborative approach, bringing together experts from different fields like computer science, ethics, law, social sciences, to make sure we're thinking about all the angles.
Okay, so that's AI. A lot to consider there. We've covered a lot of ground in this conversation, from practical tools to big picture issues like AI and global regulations. Where do we go from here?
Well, in part three, I think we should shift gears from understanding the problems to envisioning solutions.
Okay, I like that.
We'll explore some paths forward for creating a more privacy-respecting digital world.
Sounds good. I'm ready. We're back for the final part of our deep dive into digital privacy, and I'm really excited for this part. We've talked about the problems, the tools, and now I want to look ahead. What does the future hold for privacy in this digital world?
It's the million-dollar question.
Mhm.
And honestly, I think it's a future we can shape, but it takes a change in how we think about things
Mm.
and a commitment to working together.
I like that. A future we can shape. So where do we start? A lot of those articles you sent talked about global cooperation, but is that even realistic? I mean, different countries have such different values and laws.
Yeah, it's a challenge for sure. But digital privacy doesn't stop at borders. Data flows all over the world, so we have to find ways to work together to protect it.
So we can't just rely on individual countries to handle this?
Right, one country might have great privacy laws,
Hmm.
but if your data goes to a country with weaker protections, those laws don't mean much. It's like trying to plug holes in a leaky bucket.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So are there any good examples of countries working together on digital privacy?
The European Union's General Data Protection Regulation, the GDPR, is a pretty good example. It's a really high standard for data protection, and some people say it's influenced privacy laws in other countries.
So the GDPR is like a model for other countries to follow.
Could be. It's definitely been influential. It shows that it is possible to create strong privacy laws that actually get enforced on a large scale.
Hmm.
But obviously, getting everyone on the same page globally is a massive task. And we have to think about those cultural differences we talked about.
Right. Like how some cultures value security more than privacy, while others really emphasize individual freedom. Finding common ground sounds tough.
It is. It takes a lot of talking,
Yeah.
a willingness to compromise, and understanding that there's no perfect solution for everyone.
Hmm.
But I think we have to keep trying to find some consistency. Otherwise, people are left vulnerable, and the whole system is open to exploitation.
Okay, so global cooperation is important. What else needs to change to create a more privacy-respecting future?
We need strong ethical guidelines for how technology is developed and used. Technology is a tool. It can be used for good or bad. It all comes down to the choices we make.
I get that. But how do we make those ethical principles a reality? It seems kind of vague.
Well, one way is to build those ethics right into the design process. It's called ethics by design, or privacy by design.
Yeah.
Instead of thinking about privacy as an afterthought, you make it a core part of the technology from the very beginning.
So you're thinking about privacy from the start, not just adding it on later as an extra feature.
Right. You're trying to prevent problems before they happen. For example, if you're designing a new social media platform, you could build in features that give people more control over their data, or limit how much information is collected in the first place.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like making privacy the default setting,
Yeah.
not just a hidden option that most people probably don't even know about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't just be up to the tech companies to decide what those ethical principles are. It has to be a collaborative process involving ethicists, legal experts, and most importantly, the people who will be using the technology.
Right. It can't just be a bunch of tech guys in Silicon Valley making all the decisions.
Exactly. Technology should give people more power, not take it away. And that brings me to another really important element, grassroots advocacy.
People power. This is where we, the users, can actually make a difference.
Absolutely.
Hmm?
Remember those organizations we talked about, like the Electronic Frontier Foundation? They're doing great work fighting for digital rights, but they need people's support to do it.
So donating, volunteering, spreading the word, that actually helps.
It makes a huge difference. Grassroots movements have always been powerful. And in the digital age, it's easier than ever to connect with people and make your voice heard.
So it's about holding companies and governments accountable, letting them know we care about our privacy.
Yes, and we can vote with our wallets too, supporting businesses that value privacy and boycotting those that don't.
Like being a conscious consumer. But instead of just thinking about the product, you're also thinking about your data.
I like that. Every click, every purchase online creates data. And together, that data is incredibly powerful.
It's like our data is currency in this digital world.
That's a great way to think about it. And we have to be smart about how we spend that currency, making choices that match our values.
Okay, so global cooperation, ethical frameworks, grassroots action, those are all big things. But what about for me personally? What's the most important thing I can do to protect my privacy right now?
That's a good question. If I had to pick one thing, I'd say it's developing a critical mindset, questioning assumptions, evaluating your sources, and being aware of the ways our online experiences can be manipulated.
So don't just believe everything you see on the internet.
Right, the internet is amazing, but it's also full of misinformation, manipulation, and surveillance. We have to be careful about what we consume, not just passively absorbing everything that comes our way.
Think for yourself. Don't let algorithms do it for you.
Exactly. And that critical thinking is crucial for navigating all the ethical questions around technology. It's about asking yourself, what are my values? What kind of digital world do I want to live in? And what can I do to help create that world?
Those are good questions. Questions we all need to be asking ourselves.
I think so. There's no one right answer for everyone. But by having these conversations, raising awareness and demanding better from our leaders and the companies we do business with, we can build a digital future that's more ethical, more equitable, and more respectful of our privacy.
I completely agree. Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive into digital privacy. It's been a fascinating conversation.
It has been.
And I hope everyone listening has learned something new and feels empowered to take action. We've covered so much, from the basics of data protection to the complex world of AI and the power of collective action. But this is just the beginning. The digital world is always changing, and we have to stay informed if we want to protect our privacy. So keep exploring, keep learning, and keep asking those tough questions.
The future of privacy is not set in stone. It's up to all of us to shape it.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay empowered.